Hello there, and welcome to the Sleep with Science channel. Before we get started, if you love exploring the depths of space as much as we do, take a second to like the video or subscribe. It's a simple action, but it helps the channel to reach more curious minds like yours. Now let's begin. Close your eyes, if you'd like. Let your breath slow down, let your shoulders soften into whatever is holding you right now, and let your mind drift upward, past the ceiling, past the clouds, past the thin blue skin of our atmosphere, into the endless dark. Tonight, we are not going to talk about a planet. We are not even going to talk about a galaxy the size of our own Milky Way. Tonight, we are going to talk about something so vast, so incomprehensibly large, that the scientists who first measured it had to double-check their instruments, certain they had made some catastrophic error. They had not. What they found was real. And once you understand its true size, you may never look at the night sky the same way again. Somewhere out there, roughly 1 billion light-years from where you are lying right now, drifts a galaxy so massive that if you placed it where our Milky Way sits, its outer edges would swallow whole neighboring galaxies as if they were nothing more than dust caught in a passing breeze. Scientists have a name for it, but the name is almost irrelevant. What matters is the number. What matters is the feeling that creeps in, slow and cold, when you begin to grasp just how small everything you have ever known truly is. Our Sun, so massive it holds 8 planets in permanent orbit through sheer gravitational will, is a single, forgettable ember inside a galaxy of 400 billion stars. And that galaxy, our galaxy, the one that contains every sunrise you've ever seen, every person you've ever loved, every quiet night like this one, is a rounding error beside the giant we are about to enter. This is not a story meant to frighten you. And yet, there is something within it that unsettles the mind in the gentlest, strangest way, the way standing at the edge of a canyon at night unsettles you, or the way the ocean feels different once you know how deep it truly goes beneath your feet. There is a particular kind of awe that borders on fear, and tonight, drifting somewhere between waking and sleep, I want you to sit inside that feeling. Not to be afraid of it. Just to let it hold you, the way the dark itself is holding you right now. Perhaps you have felt something like this before, on a clear night far from city lights, tilting your head back and realizing that you were looking at something far older and larger than your mind was built to hold. That feeling was only the smallest hint, a single dim star's worth of scale, compared to what waits for us tonight. The galaxy we are moving toward does not simply sit larger in the dark. It reshapes what the word large is even allowed to mean. Let's begin gently, the way all great journeys begin, not with the destination, but with the reminder of scale. Light, the fastest thing in existence, the thing that reaches your eyes the instant you open them, takes just over 1 second to travel from the moon to the Earth. It takes about 8 minutes to travel from the Sun. To cross our own galaxy, the Milky Way, from one edge to the other, light needs 100,000 years. 100,000 years, just to cross a single galaxy among the 2 trillion galaxies scientists now believe exist in the observable universe. Sit with that number for a moment. 2 trillion galaxies. And among all of them, among every swirling spiral and drifting elliptical cloud of stars ever observed by human eyes or human instruments, one galaxy rises above all the rest in sheer, staggering size. It was found quietly, the way most of the universe's greatest secrets are found, not through some dramatic announcement, but through years of patient astronomers sifting through light that had been traveling toward Earth since before our own solar system even existed. That light, ancient and faint, carried within it the shape of something almost impossible to believe. A galaxy stretching so far across the darkness that its true edges are still debated to this day, blurring gently into intergalactic space itself, into the thin, ghostly halo of stars that seem to have no clear boundary at all. Tonight, we are going to travel there together, slowly, the way sleep itself arrives, in gentle waves rather than sudden drops. We will drift past familiar stars first, past the quiet corners of our own galactic neighborhood, before easing outward into deeper, stranger dark. There is no need to hurry. Scale like this cannot be rushed, and honestly, part of the beauty of this journey lies in how unhurried it truly is. So let your body sink a little deeper into the bed beneath you, let your thoughts loosen their grip on the day now behind you, and simply listen as we begin drifting toward the edge of everything we thought we understood about size, about distance, and about what it truly means for something to exist on a scale the human mind was never quite designed to hold. So breathe in slowly now, and as you breathe out, let your body grow heavier against the sheets, heavier against the pillow beneath your head, as if gravity itself were gently, slowly increasing, drawing you down into stillness while your mind keeps drifting up, past the last thin wisps of cloud, into a sky that never ends. We should start close to home tonight, because that is how every great distance is truly measured, not by the size of the destination, but by the size of the small, quiet steps that lead there. Our own galaxy, the Milky Way, is shaped like a vast, flattened, glowing spiral, 100,000 light-years from edge to edge, its arms curling slowly and endlessly around a bright and crowded center. Inside that center lies a supermassive black hole, a place where light itself cannot escape, patiently anchoring hundreds of billions of stars in their long, silent orbits. Our Sun is one of those stars, a small, steady flame drifting along one of the outer arms, carrying the Earth, carrying the Moon, carrying every single thing you have ever known, on a slow and endless circle around that distant, invisible center. It takes our Sun roughly 230 million years to complete just one loop around the galaxy. The last time our solar system was in this exact position, dinosaurs had not yet appeared on Earth. Let that settle for a moment now, quietly, the way a stone settles slowly through still, dark water. 230 million years, for a single lap around a galaxy that is, itself, almost unbearably small compared to what we are moving toward tonight. Now, gently, slowly, let your mind lift higher, beyond the edge of the Milky Way, into the quiet gulf of space that separates galaxies from one another. Out here, distances stop being measured in anything as small as miles or even light years, and instead begin to be measured in millions, then hundreds of millions, then billions of light years. This is the realm astronomers call the cosmic web, an almost invisible structure of filaments and voids, where galaxies cluster together like small towns built along ancient, unseen rivers of dark matter, connected by threads of gas and gravity stretching across unimaginable emptiness. Some regions of this web are dense, crowded with thousands of galaxies bound together in tight, gravitational embrace. Other regions are almost entirely empty, vast cosmic deserts hundreds of millions of light-years wide, where a traveler could journey for an eternity and never pass a single star. It is somewhere along one of these great filaments, in a quiet, unremarkable corner of the universe, that astronomers first noticed something strange. A faint smudge of light, captured decades ago by telescopes far less powerful than the ones we have today, sitting patiently in old photographic plates, waiting to be understood. At first, it seemed unremarkable, just another distant elliptical galaxy, one of billions catalogued and set aside. It was only much later, when newer instruments turned their attention back toward that same patch of sky, that scientists began to realize the smudge was not simply distant. It was enormous. Impossibly, almost unbelievably enormous, stretching so far beyond its own visible core that its faint outer halo blurred quietly into the surrounding dark, refusing to show where it truly ended. This is often how the universe quietly reveals its greatest secrets, not with sudden drama, but with quiet, patient re-examination. A telescope pointed a little longer. An exposure held a little deeper into the darkness. A researcher, late at night, noticing a strange, faint smear of light at the very edge of an image and choosing, out of pure curiosity, to look closer instead of looking away. That single choice, made in a quiet observatory decades ago, eventually led to one of the most staggering discoveries in the history of astronomy, one that would take years of careful measurement, cross-checking, and quiet disbelief before anyone was willing to say aloud just how large this galaxy truly seemed to be. Let your breathing settle into that rhythm now, slow and unhurried, in for 4 counts, and out for 6, as we begin moving closer to that ancient light, drifting through the dark the way a leaf drifts on still water, unhurried, weightless, carried more than moving. Understand, as we do, that the galaxy we are approaching sits so far from Earth that the light reaching our telescopes tonight left its source long before humanity existed, long before the first cities were built, long before the first fire was lit beneath a night sky. That light has been traveling, silently, patiently, for over 1 billion years, crossing an emptiness so vast that even light, the fastest thing in the universe, needed all that time simply to arrive. And what that ancient light reveals, once it finally reaches our instruments, once it finally reaches your mind tonight, drifting quietly through the dark, is a structure so large that it forces us to quietly reconsider everything we thought we understood about size, about boundaries, and about what a single galaxy is even capable of becoming when given enough time, enough patient gravity, and enough vast, undisturbed darkness in which to grow, patiently, silently, for billions upon billions of years, until it became something that no longer resembled any ordinary galaxy at all, but rather a slow, sprawling kingdom of stars stretching so far into the dark that its own astronomers, the ones who first measured it, felt a quiet chill settle over the observatory room when the final numbers appeared on the screen. Let your breath continue, slow and even, in through the nose, out through the mouth, as we finally allow ourselves, gently, to name what we have been circling all this time. The galaxy astronomers eventually identified, sitting quietly at the heart of a massive galaxy cluster over 1 billion light-years from Earth, became known to science as a supergiant elliptical galaxy, one so large that it would eventually be recognized as one of the single largest galaxies ever observed by human instruments. Unlike the elegant spiral of our own Milky Way, with its curling arms and bright, defined edges, this galaxy has almost no discernible shape at all in the traditional sense. It is not a disk. It is not a spiral. It is something closer to a vast, slow-breathing cloud of hundreds of trillions of stars, spreading outward in every direction, its light fading so gradually into the surrounding darkness that even today, astronomers cannot agree on exactly where the galaxy ends and where empty space finally begins. Picture it now, gently, slowly, the way you might picture a distant mountain range dissolving quietly into fog at the edges of your vision. If our Milky Way, 100,000 light-years across, were placed at the very center of this galaxy, our entire galaxy, home to our Sun, our Earth, every star you have ever wished upon, would occupy only the smallest, faintest fraction of the space this giant fills. Some estimates place the full diameter of this galaxy at more than 6 million light-years across, an almost unbelievable number. 6 million. Let that number rest in your mind the way a heavy stone rests at the bottom of a still, quiet lake. Light, traveling at the fastest possible speed in the entire universe, 186,000 miles every single second, would still need over 6 million years just to cross from one edge of this galaxy to the other. To help that number settle even more deeply into your mind, consider this quiet comparison. The nearest large galaxy to our own, a spiral neighbor drifting quietly through the dark some 2.5 million light-years away, is often described by astronomers as being right next door to us, cosmically speaking. And yet, the galaxy we are now approaching, the one waiting patiently at the center of tonight's journey, could comfortably contain that entire distance, and more, within its own soft, fading boundaries. If you were to stand at its very core and look outward, you would find star clusters, ancient and cold, drifting far beyond where any comparison to our own galactic neighborhood could possibly reach. Scientists believe this galaxy grew to such an almost impossible, staggering size the slow way, the patient way, the way most truly extraordinary things in the universe quietly come into being. Not through some single, sudden, dramatic event, but through countless quiet mergers, stretched slowly across billions of years, Smaller galaxies drawn inward one by the relentless, invisible pull of gravity, absorbed gently into the growing giant the way tributaries are absorbed into a great, slow river, each merger adding more stars, more mass, more sprawling reach into the dark, until what remained was no longer recognizable as any single galaxy at all, but rather the accumulated memory of countless smaller ones, folded quietly together into one continuous, breathing structure. There is something deeply strange about sitting quietly with this idea as you drift towards sleep tonight, something that feels, if you let it, almost like standing at the edge of a dark ocean whose far shore you know exists, but whose distance you can never truly picture, no matter how long you stare into the still water ahead of you. This is not fear in the way we usually understand and recognize fear. It is something quieter, and somehow larger than fear, the particular gentle sensation of realizing that everything you have ever called big, every mountain, every ocean, every galaxy you have ever quietly imagined, was simply too small a measuring stick for what actually exists out there, patiently waiting in the endless dark, entirely indifferent to whether we ever discover it or not. And yet, discover it we did. Slowly, carefully, across decades of careful and patient observation, teams of astronomers using increasingly powerful telescopes returned again and again to that same quiet patch of sky, refining their measurements, checking and rechecking the faint, spreading light at the galaxy's edges, cross-referencing old photographic plates against new digital images, until they became certain, beyond any reasonable doubt, that what they were looking at was real. Not an illusion caused by some nearby foreground star casting a faint, misleading glow. Not a flaw in the instrument, or a smudge on an aging lens. A genuine, physical structure of almost unthinkable scale, sitting quietly in the dark, waiting, as it had been waiting for billions of years, for someone, somewhere, to finally look closely enough and long enough to confirm what their instruments were quietly, patiently telling them, again and again, night after night, across long years of careful, unhurried work. Let your body settle a little deeper now, into the soft weight of the blankets around you, into the quiet, gentle hush of the room, as we finally speak its name, the way you might finally, softly speak the name of someone you have been thinking about all evening without quite saying it aloud. Astronomers call this quiet galaxy IC 1101. 3 simple characters, a single letter and a string of numbers, almost administrative in their plainness, the kind of quiet, unremarkable label given to thousands upon thousands of distant, ancient objects catalogued over the decades by patient, careful hands. And yet, behind that plain little name sits one of the largest single structures ever confirmed to exist in the entire observable universe, a galaxy so overwhelming in scale that many astronomers, upon first encountering its true measurements, have described the same strange, quiet disorientation, the sense of a number simply, quietly refusing to fit inside the mind meant to hold it. IC 1101 sits at the very quiet center of a massive, sprawling cluster of galaxies known to astronomers as Able 2029, itself an almost unimaginably crowded region of space containing hundreds, some astronomers say well over 1,000 individual galaxies, all bound together tightly by gravity into one slow, drifting cosmic family. Clusters like this are among the very largest gravitationally bound structures in the entire known universe, spanning millions upon millions of light years and containing far more raw mass than the mind can comfortably picture, most of it invisible, hidden quietly away in the mysterious form of dark matter that astronomers can measure only through its gravitational influence, never through any light of its own. And at the heart of Able 2029, sitting quietly like some ancient, patient monarch resting at the center of its own vast kingdom, rests IC 1101, drawing smaller galaxies toward itself across unimaginable stretches of time, absorbing them slowly, gently, quietly, the way falling snow absorbs quietly into deep, undisturbed drifts, one soft flake settling quietly into another until an entire mountain of white has grown, unnoticed, from what once seemed impossibly small and insignificant. Let your breathing slow even further now. In, gently, 4 slow counts. Hold, softly, for just a single moment. And out, slowly, for 6. As your body continues to settle, heavier now, quieter now, let your mind hold this single image, the picture of IC 1101 as it truly appears through the most powerful telescopes ever built by human hands. Not a bright, clearly defined spiral with clean, sharp edges the way we so often imagine galaxies to look, but something softer, hazier, a vast golden haze of ancient starlight fading gradually into black, its true boundary lost somewhere in the deep, unmeasured dark far beyond what any single photograph could ever fully capture. Scientists estimate that IC 1101 contains somewhere between 100 trillion and a truly staggering 400 trillion individual stars, an almost impossible range of numbers to even quietly consider. Sit with that range for a moment, the sheer uncertainty of it, the fact that even our best and most powerful instruments cannot narrow the number down more precisely than an interval spanning hundreds of trillions. For comparison, our own Milky Way, home to everything you have ever quietly known, everyone you have ever quietly loved, contains somewhere around 400 billion stars. 400 billion, against as many as 400 trillion. That is not simply a larger number. That is an entirely different order of existence altogether. 1,000 Milky Ways worth of stars, folded quietly together into a single breathing structure of light, drifting patiently through the dark over 1 billion light years from the quiet room where you are lying right now, eyes closed, breathing slow. And at the very center of this vast, sprawling galaxy, astronomers believe there rests a black hole so massive that comparing it to the black hole at the heart of our own Milky Way feels almost absurd, the way comparing a single grain of sand to an entire mountain range would feel absurd. Our galaxy's central black hole, itself already unimaginably dense, contains a mass roughly 4 million times that of our Sun, a number that alone is difficult enough to hold steady in a tired, drifting mind. The black hole believed to anchor IC 1101, by contrast, may hold a mass tens of billions of times greater than our Sun, a gravitational well so deep, so overwhelmingly powerful, that light itself, once close enough, has no possible path of escape, bending helplessly around a darkness from which nothing, not even the fastest thing in existence, can ever return. Let that thought settle now, slowly, into the quiet, folded corners of your mind, the way settling snow gathers silently on a windowsill overnight, unnoticed until the soft light of morning arrives. Somewhere out there tonight, far beyond anything your eyes could ever see unaided, sits a point of gravity so absolute, so complete, that it could, in theory, quietly consume light itself for billions upon billions of years and never once appear to grow full, never once appear satisfied, simply continuing, patiently, endlessly, the slow and silent work of pulling everything nearby a little closer, a little deeper, into its own unwavering dark. This is the quiet architecture of Alcyonius, a galaxy so vast that comparing it to the Milky Way feels almost like comparing a single grain of sand to an entire shoreline stretching beyond the horizon. Its radio lobes, those immense twin plumes of energy erupting from its center, extend across nearly 16 million light-years of space. 16 million. Let that number rest in the dark with you for a moment. Not 16 million miles. Not 16 million stars. 16 million light-years, a span so large that if you tried to walk its length at the speed of light, you would still be traveling long after every star visible in tonight's sky had quietly burned down to embers and gone dark. And yet, for all its staggering size, Alcyonius does not announce itself the way you might expect something so immense to announce itself. There is no violent flash, no dramatic shockwave rippling toward Earth. It simply exists, calm and colossal, its faint radio glow spreading outward like breath fogging slowly across a cold window pane, expanding, thinning, and yet somehow never quite disappearing. Astronomers only found it by listening, not looking, tuning enormous radio telescopes to frequencies far beneath what human eyes could ever perceive, and even then, its structure appeared only as the faintest whisper of light spread across an ocean of silence. Picture, if you can, the small, quiet town where its host galaxy resides, roughly 1 billion light-years from where you now lie. Around it, other galaxies drift in their slow gravitational choreography, distant enough from Alcyonius that they remain untouched by its reach, and yet close enough that if you could somehow stand upon one of their outer worlds and look up, you might catch the ghost of that vast radio structure stretching like some enormous, silent wing across the black. There is something deeply humbling in understanding that the largest known structure of its kind in the observable universe was not discovered through some dramatic telescope image, glowing and radiant, but through the careful accumulation of nearly invisible data, gathered patiently over years, decoded slowly, the way you might come to understand the shape of a dream only long after waking. It reminds us that scale, true scale, so often escapes our senses. The universe rarely shouts. It murmurs. And it is only in stillness, in patience, in this very kind of quiet attentiveness you are practicing right now, that its murmurs become audible at all. At the heart of Alcyonius lies a supermassive black hole, the origin point of all that reaching structure, feeding not violently in this era of its life, but gently, gradually, the way a fire settles into embers rather than roaring flame. Its jets, launched long ago, still coast outward through intergalactic space, carried by momentum built across scales of time that make a human lifetime seem like a single breath drawn and released in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Consider, for a moment, what it means for something to still be moving, still be expanding, still be reaching outward, powered by an event that may have begun hundreds of millions of years before the first trilobites ever stirred in Earth's ancient oceans. The light and particles you would need to observe to understand its beginning left that black hole so long ago that entire mountain ranges on Earth have risen, and eroded, and vanished again in the time it has taken that structure to grow to its current, almost incomprehensible size. And still, out there, it continues, silently expanding. Indifferent to whether anyone is watching. Indifferent to whether anyone ever will be. There is a strange comfort hidden inside that indifference, if you allow yourself to feel it. Because if the universe can hold something so vast, so ancient, so quietly overwhelming, and continue on its way without needing your attention, your understanding, or even your existence to justify its unfolding, then perhaps you, too, are permitted to simply exist tonight without needing to justify anything at all. Perhaps you are allowed to simply rest inside the moment, small and warm and breathing, while somewhere far above you, structures larger than reason itself drift on in their own unhurried, eternal time. Your body, resting now beneath whatever soft weight of blanket surrounds you, is built from atoms forged inside stars that lived and died long before our sun ever ignited. And it is a strange, quiet gift to realize that the same physical laws shaping the collapse of stellar cores into black holes, the same equations describing the bending of space around infinite density, are also, somehow, describing the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing right now, the gentle rise and fall of your chest, governed by forces both impossibly vast and impossibly intimate. Somewhere between those two extremes, the unfathomably large and the immediately, tenderly small, lies the space where understanding actually happens. Not in grasping the whole of Alcyonius at once, because no mind, however brilliant, can truly hold 16 million light-years inside a single thought, but in allowing pieces of it to drift in gently, the way starlight drifts down through miles of atmosphere to finally, softly, land upon closed eyes, carrying with it not fear, but a kind of vast, quiet tenderness, folding itself slowly around the edges of your thoughts, the way fog folds itself around the base of a mountain at dusk, softening every hard edge until only shape and shadow remain, until sharpness gives way to something gentler, something you can finally rest inside. Let your attention drift now, further out, past Alcyonius, past its slow twin plumes of ancient light, into the wider architecture of the cosmic web itself, that vast, invisible lattice of filaments and voids upon which every galaxy, every cluster, every quiet point of gravity finds its place. Imagine, if you can, an immense structure made not of steel or stone but of dark matter and hydrogen gas, stretched thin across billions of light-years, glowing faintly where galaxies cluster like dew gathering along the strands of some impossibly vast spiderweb, hanging silently in the black. This is the true shape of the universe at its largest scales, not scattered randomly, not chaotic, but patterned, threaded, woven slowly over nearly 14 billion years by gravity's patient, invisible hand. Within this web, galaxies do not simply float in isolation. They gather. They cluster along filaments the way small towns cluster along a river, drawn together by resources they cannot see, shaped by forces older than any of them individually. And where these filaments cross, where the threads of the web intersect and thicken, entire clusters of galaxies pool together into structures so massive that light itself bends visibly around them, curving softly through space the way a slow current bends around a stone. Consider, for a moment, the Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall, a structure so immense that its full span challenges the very models we use to describe how the universe grows. 10 billion light-years across, roughly. Let that settle the way morning frost settles slowly across a window pane, one quiet crystal at a time. 10 billion light-years is nearly the entire observable width of the universe traced across cosmic time, a structure so large that some physicists once wondered whether it should exist at all, whether something so vast could form within the patient, gradual timeline that governs the growth of cosmic structure. And yet, there it is. Quiet, distant, utterly indifferent to your wondering. There is something almost dreamlike in imagining what it might be like to travel along that great wall, drifting slowly from galaxy cluster to galaxy cluster, watching light bend and gather and scatter across regions so vast that entire concepts of near and far begin to lose their meaning. In such a place, a single galaxy, even one as staggeringly large as Alcyonius, becomes just one soft point of light among countless others, one voice within an enormous, silent choir stretching farther than imagination can comfortably reach. And still, even within that immensity, patterns remain. Structure remains. The universe, vast as it is, does not descend into pure chaos. It organizes itself slowly, gently, the way sand settles into ripples along a shoreline, shaped not by any single grain's intention, but by the quiet accumulation of countless small forces acting together across long stretches of time. Gravity is patient. Gravity does not rush. It simply pulls, softly, continuously, allowing structure to emerge the way patterns emerge in a mind drifting slowly toward sleep, not through force, but through gentle, persistent tendency. Picture your own breathing now, slow and unhurried, matching in some small, quiet way the vast, unhurried rhythm of the cosmos itself. In through the darkness, out into the stillness. There is no need to rush toward understanding tonight. There is no need to hold the full shape of the universe within your mind all at once. Instead, let it come in soft pieces, the way starlight arrives not all at once but photon by photon, each one traveling for years, decades, millennia, before finally settling gently upon your resting eyes. Somewhere within that great wall, unseen and unremarkable from any human vantage point, countless stars are being born even now, gathering slowly from clouds of gas and dust, warming gradually into light. And somewhere else, equally unseen, stars are ending, collapsing softly inward, some fading into quiet white dwarfs, others collapsing further still into the dense, silent gravity wells that anchor points like Alcyonius. Birth and ending, woven together endlessly across the same vast structure, neither one canceling the other, both simply part of the same slow, continuous unfolding. There is no urgency in any of it. No countdown. No deadline. Just the long, patient turning of cosmic time, indifferent to clocks, indifferent to calendars, indifferent to anything except the steady pull of gravity and the equally steady expansion of space itself, stretching the fabric of the universe wider with every passing moment, carrying galaxies farther from one another even as it carries you gently closer to sleep. Let yourself rest inside that contradiction for a while, the universe expanding outward while your own body settles inward, growing heavier, softer, quieter, sinking into stillness even as space itself continues its slow, invisible unfolding, wave after wave, thread after silent thread, until the fabric of the cosmic web seems less like something out there, distant and untouchable, and more like something you are quietly held within, woven into, the same as any galaxy, any filament, any drifting cloud of hydrogen waiting patiently to become something else. Let your mind settle now upon a single filament of that vast web, one thin strand of gas and dark matter stretching between two distant clusters, invisible to the naked eye, invisible even to most telescopes, and yet real, tangible, mapped slowly across decades of careful observation. Imagine drifting along its length, the way a single leaf might drift along some slow, wide river, carried not by any will of its own but by the patient current beneath it. Along this filament, matter gathers almost imperceptibly, drawn inward by gravity so faint it would take millions of years to notice any movement at all. And yet, given enough time, that faint pull is enough. It is always enough. This is the quiet secret of the universe, that even the gentlest force, given sufficient patience, can shape the grandest structures imaginable. Consider how strange it is that something as delicate as gravity, weaker by far than the other fundamental forces, weaker than electromagnetism, weaker than the forces binding atomic nuclei together, is nonetheless the architect of everything vast. It does not need strength. It needs only time. And time is the one resource the universe has always possessed in near infinite abundance. Nearly 14 billion years have passed since the first flicker of light broke free from the hot, dense fog of the early universe, and in that vast stretch of patient unfolding, gravity has had all the time it required to gather whispers of matter into galaxies, galaxies into clusters, clusters into filaments, filaments into walls stretching farther than light itself has had time to fully cross. There is a certain peace in recognizing that grand things are rarely built quickly. Even now, this very galaxy filament you are imagining continues to thicken, slowly, gradually, gathering perhaps a few additional stars' worth of matter every million years, an almost imperceptible rate of growth when measured against a human lifetime, yet utterly relentless when measured against the deep well of cosmic time. Nothing about this process resembles urgency. Nothing about it resembles struggle. It resembles, instead, something closer to breathing, slow inhalation and exhalation repeated across scales so vast that a single cycle might span longer than the entire history of life on Earth. Picture, if you will, the quiet clusters of galaxies scattered along this same filament, each one a small city of light within the greater architecture of the cosmic web, containing perhaps 1,000 galaxies bound loosely together by mutual gravity, drifting slowly around a shared center of mass the way moths might circle a single distant flame, close enough to feel its pull, far enough to never quite collide. Within these clusters, galaxies occasionally do merge, slowly, gently, over hundreds of millions of years, their spiral arms unwinding into each other, their stars rarely colliding directly, space between them being so vast that two galaxies can effectively pass through one another without a single direct stellar collision, only shifting, reshaping, blending gradually into something new. There is something profoundly reassuring in that fact, that even collision, even merger, even the ending of one galactic shape into another, so rarely resembles violence up close, and instead resembles a kind of achingly slow embrace, spiral arms curling together like two slow currents finally meeting in some quiet tidal pool, reshaping gently rather than shattering. If you allow yourself to sit inside that image for a while, you may notice how it softens something in your chest, some quiet tension you may not have realized you were holding. Because so often, when we imagine cosmic scale, we imagine catastrophe, imagine violence, imagine forces beyond comprehension colliding in chaos. And yet, so much of what actually happens across these unimaginable distances unfolds with a gentleness that mirrors sleep itself, slow, unhurried, patient beyond anything language can fully hold. Somewhere within this same filament, light from a supernova that occurred millions of years ago is only now reaching the space around neighboring galaxies, arriving like a soft, final whisper from a star that ended its life long before that light completed its journey. Somewhere else, an entirely new star is condensing quietly from a collapsing cloud of gas, gathering mass, gathering warmth, preparing to ignite at some point far in the future, long after this very moment of narration has faded from memory. All of this continues, layer upon layer, thread upon thread, whether or not anyone is awake to witness it. And there is comfort in that continuity, comfort in knowing that the universe does not pause for attention, does not require witnesses to justify its unfolding, and yet somehow, in this very moment, you are among the witnesses anyway, resting quietly beneath its vast and patient architecture, drifting slowly deeper into the same slow current that carries galaxies, that carries filaments, that carries light itself across the long, dark distances between one silence and the next. Let your attention settle now upon something closer to home, though closer is a strange word to use across distances still measured in the millions of light-years. Consider the local group, that quiet gathering of galaxies to which the Milky Way itself belongs, a modest cluster by cosmic standards, containing perhaps 80 known galaxies, most of them small, faint, easily overlooked, drifting together in a loose gravitational bond that has held for billions of years and will continue, slowly reshaping itself, for billions more. Within this gathering, two galaxies dominate the gentle architecture, the Milky Way and Andromeda, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, each anchored by its own supermassive black hole, each entirely unaware, in any meaningful sense, of the other's quiet, patient approach. Andromeda is approaching. It has always been approaching, drawn by gravity across 2.5 million light-years of intervening dark, closing that distance slowly, persistently, at roughly 250,000 miles per hour, a speed that sounds swift until you remember the scale of the emptiness it must cross. At that pace, it will take Andromeda and the Milky Way nearly 4 billion more years to complete their slow, gravitational embrace. 4 billion years. Long enough for oceans to rise and fall on countless worlds. Long enough for stars now young to grow old and fade entirely. Long enough that no human eye, no human mind, will ever witness the moment of their meeting. And yet, even now, this slow approach is already shaping both galaxies in quiet, almost imperceptible ways, tidal forces beginning to stretch their outer edges ever so slightly, gravitational whispers exchanged silently across the dark, the way two people standing across a vast room might feel, long before speaking, a subtle shift in the space between them. Picture, if you can, the eventual moment of that merger, not as some violent collision, but as the same gentle unwinding described before, spiral arms slowly losing their shape, stars rearranging themselves not through collision but through the patient reshuffling of gravity, forming, eventually, a single elliptical galaxy where two spirals once turned independently. Astronomers have already given this future galaxy a name, Milkomeda, a quiet placeholder for something that will not exist for billions of years, and yet already carries a name, already carries a shape in our imagination, long before it carries a shape in the actual dark of space. There is something strange and moving in that, naming something that does not yet exist, describing a shape not yet formed, based entirely on the patient mathematics of gravity and motion extended forward across a gulf of time so vast it becomes almost meaningless to human experience. It is, in its own way, a form of hope extended not toward the self, but toward deep time itself, an acknowledgement that structure will continue to form, quietly, gently, whether or not anyone remains to name it when it finally does. Consider your own place within this unfolding, resting now upon this small, quiet planet, orbiting a modest yellow star, itself embedded within one spiral arm of a galaxy slowly approaching its distant companion. Every atom within your body, drawn from the same slow processes of stellar birth and death that shape galaxies far larger than our own, is, in some very real sense, already part of the same unfolding story, already caught within the same gravitational current that will, eventually, long after you and everyone you have ever known has returned quietly to stardust, draw two galaxies into one. There is no need to hold the weight of 4 billion years within your mind tonight. That number exists not to overwhelm you, but to offer perspective, the way looking up at a night sky full of stars offers perspective, not to diminish your own existence, but to place it gently within something larger, something patient, something unfolding calmly regardless of whether you are awake or asleep to witness even the smallest part of it. Let your breathing continue its own slow rhythm, unrelated to galactic timescales and yet, in some strange, quiet way, harmonized with them, each breath a small unfolding, each exhale a small release, mirroring, faintly, the way galaxies exhale gas outward even as they inhale new matter along their spiral arms, mirroring the way the universe itself continues to expand and contract in localized pockets, breathing across scales too vast to fully comprehend, and yet somehow, in this quiet moment, not so distant from the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of your own chest, rising and falling in the dark. Somewhere out beyond the reach of any telescope humanity has yet built, Alcyonius continues its slow, silent sprawl through the cosmic web, a filament of radiolight stretched across more than 16 million light-years, a structure so vast that if it were placed where our own galaxy sits, its edges would brush against clusters of galaxies we have not yet named, would touch regions of space so distant that the light from them left its source before the Earth had finished cooling from its molten birth. And yet, for all its size, Alcyonius is quiet. It does not announce itself with violence or brilliance. It is not a supernova, not a gamma-ray burst tearing across the sky in a single blinding instant. It is patient. It is slow. It is the radio jets of a supermassive black hole, whispering their energy outward across timescales too long for any single mind to hold, a whisper that has been going on, uninterrupted, for longer than most of the structures we call permanent on Earth have existed. Consider, for a moment, what it means for something to be gentle and enormous at the same time. We are used to thinking of scale and violence as companions, of largeness as something that must announce itself, must overwhelm, must dominate. But the largest known galaxy, and structures like it, teach us something quieter than that. They teach us that vastness can also be soft. That a black hole can spend 100 million years exhaling particles into the void, not as an explosion but as a long, continuous breath, the plasma drifting outward at speeds that would seem impossibly fast to us and yet, across such distances, register as something closer to stillness, closer to drift, closer to the way smoke rises from a candle that has just been extinguished, curling upward in slow, unhurried spirals. You do not need to picture the jets themselves, the twin lobes of magnetized plasma reaching outward from the galaxy's core like the wings of something ancient and unseen. You do not need to hold the physics of synchrotron radiation, the way electrons spiral along magnetic field lines and emit light as they do, light that our radio telescopes catch only as the faintest whisper of signal, gathered patiently over hours, over nights, over years of quiet listening. All you need to hold, if you choose to hold anything at all, is the feeling of scale without violence. The feeling of something enormous existing calmly. The feeling of the universe doing, on a scale beyond comprehension, something not unlike what your own body is doing right now, in this room, in this quiet hour. Taking something in, releasing something out, sustaining itself through slow and steady rhythm rather than through sudden, dramatic effort. There is a kind of comfort in this, if you let yourself find it. Because so often, when we imagine the vastness of space, we imagine it as cold, as indifferent, as a place defined by explosions and collisions and the violent deaths of stars. And those things are real, and they happen, and they are part of the story too. But they are not the whole story. The whole story includes long stretches of near silence. It includes galaxies rotating slowly through billions of years without incident, stars burning steadily for spans of time that make human history look like a single held breath. It includes black holes that, instead of consuming everything nearby in a burst of violence, spend eons gently reshaping the space around them, sculpting bridges of gas and magnetic field that stretch farther than light can travel in 16 million years, and doing so without fanfare, without witnesses, without any need to be seen or understood. Perhaps this is part of what makes Alcyonius, and objects like it, both awe-inspiring and, in their own way, comforting. They ask nothing of us. They do not require our attention to continue existing. They were sprawling across the dark long before any human eye turned a telescope in their direction, and they will continue sprawling long after every telescope we have ever built has fallen silent, has crumbled, has returned to dust. Their existence is not dependent on being witnessed. And in that quiet independence, there is something almost restful. A reminder that your own worth, too, does not depend on being seen every moment, does not depend on constant motion or constant proof. Even the largest known structure in the observable universe spends most of its unfathomable lifetime simply, quietly, being. Let that quiet settle over you now, the way it has settled over Alcyonius for 100 million years and more. Let your body continue its own gentle work in the dark, unremarkable and vast in its own way, cell upon cell replicating and repairing without needing your conscious attention, mirroring, in its own small register, the slow, unattended processes unfolding across that unimaginable bridge of light and plasma between galaxies you will never see with your own eyes but which exist, nonetheless, exist steadily, exist calmly, exist in this very moment, stretching across the dark like something patient, an old and unhurried, waiting for nothing, needing nothing, simply continuing, the way your own breath continues now without your permission being required, without your effort being demanded, in and out, a rhythm older than your thoughts about it. There is a strange comfort in realizing that the universe does not perform for us. It does not arrange its most spectacular structures for the benefit of an audience. Alcyonius was not built to be discovered. It grew in the dark, indifferent to whether any species anywhere would ever turn an instrument toward it, indifferent to whether radio astronomers on a small blue planet would one day notice the faint smudge of its signal buried in decades of accumulated data. It simply grew, the way a tree grows in a forest no one will ever walk through, the way a cave deep beneath the ocean floor slowly fills with crystal formations that no eye will ever witness. Existence, at this scale, does not require witnesses. It only requires time, and gravity, and the patient accumulation of small effects across spans so long that human history folds into an instant beside them. Let yourself imagine, if only loosely, the black hole at the center of this galaxy, not as a monster, not as the devouring void of popular imagination, but as something closer to a heart, a dense, quiet engine turning matter into energy at its core, releasing that energy not in a single burst but in a long, continuous exhale that has lasted longer than most species have existed on Earth. This black hole does not need to be understood to do its work. It does not pause for comprehension. It simply continues, spinning, pulling, releasing, shaping the space around it into those two vast lobes of plasma that stretch outward like wings folded in slow motion, wings that will not finish unfolding for millions of years yet to come. And you, lying here, breathing here, exist within a universe that permits such things. A universe that allows for both the intimate scale of a single breath and the incomprehensible scale of a galaxy bridging the space between galaxy clusters. There is no contradiction in this. The same physical laws that govern the rise and fall of your chest govern the slow drift of plasma at the edge of Alcyonius's reach. Gravity does not distinguish between the small and the large. Electromagnetism does not care whether it is holding together the atoms in your fingertips or guiding electrons along a magnetic field line 16 million light-years long. The universe operates on the same handful of principles at every scale, from the quantum to the cosmic, and you are not separate from that operation. You are an expression of it, however brief, however local, however quiet. Consider, too, the matter itself. Every atom of iron in your blood, every atom of calcium in your bones, was forged inside a star that lived and died long before the Earth existed. That star's death scattered these elements across the galaxy, where they eventually gathered into the cloud of gas and dust that would become our solar system, our planet, and eventually, through processes stretching across nearly 4 billion years, you. In a very real sense, you are not separate from the universe's long unfolding. You are a temporary arrangement of its oldest material, shaped by processes that connect you, however distantly, to the same physics that built Alcyonius, that built every galaxy, every star, every black hole quietly breathing its plasma into the dark. This does not need to feel overwhelming. It can, instead, feel like belonging. Like being handed a lineage so old and so vast that your own small worries, however real, however present, are held within something larger and steadier than themselves. The universe does not ask you to solve anything tonight. It does not ask you to comprehend the full geometry of a galaxy larger than 16 million light-years across. It only asks, if it asks anything at all, that you continue breathing, continue resting, continue existing quietly within your small corner of a very large and very old unfolding. Let your thoughts loosen their grip now, the way gravity loosens its grip on gas at the outer edge of a galaxy's halo, gas that drifts slowly outward, unbound, weightless, free to move without urgency, without destination, simply drifting because drifting is what it is doing in this moment. Let your body settle further into whatever surface holds you now, the way matter settles slowly into the gravitational wells that will one day become new stars, new planets, new possibilities not yet imagined. There is no need to rush toward sleep. There is no need to force any particular thought or feeling. There is only this slow unfolding, this quiet continuation, this shared rhythm between your breathing and the breathing of a galaxy so large it seems to defy the very idea of scale, a galaxy that stretches across the dark not with violence but with patience, not with urgency but with the calm, steady persistence of something that has always known it had all the time it would ever need. There is no clock ticking inside a galaxy the way there is a clock ticking on a wall, no sense of urgency pressing it toward some deadline, some finish line it must reach before the universe moves on without it. Time, at this scale, behaves differently than it does in the small, anxious hours of a human night. A galaxy does not worry about wasted time. It does not lie awake, if such a thing could even be imagined, replaying old decisions or bracing for tomorrow. It simply exists within time, moving through it the way a river moves through a valley, shaped by it, shaping it in return, but never separate from it, never at war with it. Perhaps this, too, is something worth carrying gently into sleep tonight, the reminder that time does not have to be an adversary. It can simply be the medium in which slow, patient things unfold. Picture, if it helps, the outer reaches of Alcyonius's radio lobes, so distant from the galaxy's core that the plasma there is barely more than a whisper of charged particles spread thin across the vacuum, barely dense enough to register as anything at all, and yet still connected, still part of the same vast structure, still shaped by forces that began at the black hole's edge millions of years before that plasma ever reached so far. There is something quietly moving in this, the idea that influence can travel so far from its source and still remain meaningful, still remain part of the same continuous story. The particles at the farthest edge of that structure are not disconnected from what created them. They carry, in their motion, in their faint magnetic alignment, a memory of the black hole that first flung them outward, a memory encoded not in language but in physics, in trajectory, in the slow drift that still, after all this time, points back toward where it began. You, too, carry such memories, though yours are written in different language. The particular arrangement of atoms that make up your body carries, in some sense, a memory of every star that ever contributed to its formation, every supernova, every quiet stellar death that scattered heavy elements across the galaxy long before Earth existed. You do not need to consciously recall this for it to be true. It is simply woven into what you are made of, the way the plasma at the edge of a radio galaxy is woven into what the black hole once did, long ago, and continues, in its quiet way, to still be doing. Let this thought settle without demanding anything from you. There is no need to hold it precisely, no need to turn it over and examine it from every angle before you can rest. It can simply exist alongside you in this room, this quiet hour, the way starlight exists in the sky whether or not anyone below is awake to notice it arriving. Some of that starlight left its source before you were born. Some of it left before your parents were born, before your grandparents, before the concept of a photograph, before the invention of writing, before human beings first began painting animals onto cave walls in flickering torchlight. And still it arrives, patient, unhurried, indifferent to how long the journey has taken, simply continuing until it reaches wherever it is going, sometimes an eye, sometimes a telescope, sometimes nothing at all, absorbed by dust, scattered by gas, lost before it ever reaches a place capable of noticing it. There is no tragedy in this. Not every photon needs to be seen to have mattered in some physical sense, to have carried energy, to have been part of the universe's long conversation with itself. Not every act needs to be witnessed to have been real. This might be worth remembering the next time a day passes quietly, unremarkably, without any particular achievement to mark it, without anyone noticing the small, ordinary ways you continued to exist within it. The universe is filled with unnoticed continuations, unmeasured persistence, structures and processes unfolding steadily whether or not any observer happens to be present to record them. Alcyonius itself went unnoticed for the entire span of human civilization until, quite recently, in cosmic terms almost an instant ago, a group of astronomers noticed an unusual smear of radio emission in an old survey and began asking careful, patient questions about what it might be. Let yourself imagine that moment, briefly, gently. A scientist at a desk somewhere, looking at data collected from a radio telescope array, noticing something faint and strange stretching farther than expected, feeling a small quiet thrill at the edge of understanding, the particular hush that comes just before a discovery becomes real, just before someone gathers the courage to say, quietly, to a colleague, "I think this might be something larger than anything we have ever measured before." That quiet moment of recognition, that hush before certainty, is its own small kind of birth. Not the birth of the galaxy itself, which had already been sprawling silently across the dark for 100 million years or more, but the birth of a connection between that vast, ancient structure and a single human mind sitting somewhere on a small planet orbiting an unremarkable star. In that instant, something that had existed in total silence, entirely unwitnessed, became known, became named, became, in some small way, part of our shared human story, even though it owed nothing to us, even though it had continued perfectly well without our knowledge for longer than our species has walked upright. There is something tender in this. The way discovery does not change the thing discovered but changes, instead, the discoverer. Alcyonius did not become larger the day it was found. It simply became seen. Let yourself rest inside that idea for a moment. Being seen does not create worth. It only reveals what was already present. The galaxy was always vast, always patient, always breathing its slow plasma into intergalactic space. Whether or not any telescope on Earth happened to be pointed in its direction at just the right frequency, on just the right night, processed by just the right algorithm designed to notice faint irregularities buried in decades of accumulated data. Its scale did not depend on human attention. And so, too, perhaps, does your own worth not depend entirely on being noticed, on being measured, on being witnessed by someone else in order to be real. You were real before anyone saw you take your first breath. You will remain real in the quiet, unremarkable hours no one else witnesses, this hour included, this slow drift toward sleep that no camera will capture, no algorithm will detect, no future astronomer will ever study. And still, it counts. Still, it happened. Still, it was real. Consider how strange it is that the very radio waves now being studied from this galaxy began their journey outward before complex life had even finished evolving on Earth. When the first photons of that signal left the black hole's vicinity, Our planet was home to different creatures entirely, different oceans, different continents arranged in different configurations, the land itself still drifting slowly across the surface of the globe in patterns that would take millions of years to resolve into anything resembling the world you know today. The light left before us, in nearly every sense of the word. It traveled through the dark for spans of time that swallow entire geological eras, indifferent to the rise and fall of species, indifferent to ice ages, indifferent to the slow greening of continents and the eventual emergence of minds capable of building instruments delicate enough to catch its arrival. And yet it arrived. After all that time, after all that distance, after crossing gulfs of space that make the size of our entire solar system seem like nothing, like a single grain of sand lost somewhere within an ocean too large to measure, it arrived, and it was caught, gently, by instruments built by curious, careful hands, and turned into data, and turned into images, and turned, eventually, into understanding. There is something almost impossibly patient about this entire process. The photon does not rush. It does not need to arrive by a certain date. It simply moves at the speed light moves, indifferent to human timelines, indifferent to human urgency, and it arrives when it arrives, and that arrival is enough. Perhaps you can let this patience settle into your body now, the way patience settles into a system that has stopped resisting its own tiredness. There is no need to rush toward sleep the way there is no need to rush a photon that has already traveled for millions of years. It will arrive when it arrives. Your rest will come when it comes, not through force, not through insistence, but through the same quiet, unhurried patience that has allowed light from Alcyonius to finally reach instruments capable of understanding it, after a journey longer than almost anything you could imagine, a journey that did not require impatience to succeed, only continuation, only the simple unbroken persistence of moving forward through the dark, one moment following another, one small stretch of space following the last, until, eventually, quietly, without announcement, without fanfare, the destination is reached. Let your own breathing continue in that same unhurried spirit now, arriving at each slow exhale not because it was rushed toward, but because it simply continued, the way light continues, the way galaxies continue, the way this quiet hour continues to unfold around you, indifferent to the passing of ordinary time, patient enough to wait for you to finally, slowly, let go. Somewhere above the atmosphere that cradles you, past the thin blue skin of air that makes breath possible, past the moon and the wandering planets and the outer dark where the sun's light grows thin and finally gives up entirely, Alcyonius continues to exist in the silent way that galaxies exist, without ceremony, without awareness of being watched, simply present, simply vast, simply there in the way a mountain is there, in the way an ocean is there, indifferent to whether anyone ever learns its name. It does not know it has been named. It does not know that somewhere on a small rocky planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, careful instruments have been pointed toward it, have listened to its radio whispers, have measured the plasma jets stretching outward for millions of light years and tried, in the halting language of mathematics, to comprehend what they were seeing. The galaxy simply continues. It rotates, slowly, its stars tracing their long elliptical paths around a gravitational center too immense to fully picture, each star a small fire burning in the dark, each one following its own patient orbit, none of them in any hurry, none of them capable of hurry, bound instead to the quiet mechanics of gravity, which asks for nothing but time. And time is the one thing the universe has always had in abundance. Consider that the black hole at the heart of Alcyonius, the source of those staggering jets, may have been growing since the earliest chapters of cosmic history, feeding slowly on gas and dust and the occasional unlucky star, growing not through violence alone but through something closer to accumulation, closer to the way a river carves a canyon, not in a single dramatic afternoon, but across spans of time so long they become almost meaningless to a species that measures its own lifespan in decades. The jets themselves, those twin lighthouses of plasma reaching outward in nearly opposite directions, are thought to be shaped and confined by something the astronomers call the cosmic web, that vast, invisible lattice of gas that threads between galaxies, the leftover scaffolding from the universe's first few 100 million years, when matter was still arranging itself into the great filaments and voids that defined the large-scale structure of everything. The jets, in other words, are not simply blasting into empty space. They are being guided, gently, by structures older than the galaxy itself, structures that formed in the aftermath of the Big Bang and have persisted, quietly, invisibly, ever since, waiting, in their own way, for something like Alcyonius to come along and reveal their presence by lighting them up from within. There is a strange comfort in this, if you allow yourself to feel it. The idea that even something as violent-sounding as a black hole's radio jets, something that on the surface reads as chaos, as terrifying scale, as almost hostile immensity, is in fact moving along channels laid down by structures that have existed since the universe's infancy, following paths shaped by forces both older and larger than the galaxy producing them. Nothing here is random in the way your mind, still holding on to the last threads of wakefulness, might imagine randomness to be. It is instead layered, patient, structured according to physical laws that do not change from one end of the universe to the other, laws that apply as surely to the atoms in your own body as they do to the plasma stretching across 10 million light-years of space. The same gravity that pulls your body gently down into the mattress beneath you is, in some deep sense, kin to the gravity sculpting the shape of that unimaginable galaxy. The same physics, the same universe, only the scale differs. Let that thought move through you slowly now, without urgency, the way starlight moves through the vacuum of space, unbothered by how long the journey takes. You are not separate from this. You are not a small, forgotten observer standing outside some cosmic drama too large to include you. You are made of the same elements forged in the same kinds of stellar furnaces that once burned inside galaxies like this one, elements cooked in the hearts of dying stars and scattered outward in supernova explosions that seeded the early universe with carbon, with oxygen, with the iron now moving quietly through your blood with every slow beat of your heart. The calcium in your bones, the same calcium that gives structure to every vertebra along your spine, was assembled inside a star that died before your solar system existed. You carry that history inside you even now, even here, even as your breathing continues to slow, continues to lengthen, continues to fall into that unhurried rhythm that mirrors, in its own small and quiet way, the vast unhurried rhythms playing out across galaxies too large and too distant to fully imagine. There is no separation between you and this story. You have simply forgotten, for a while, that you were always a part of it. That forgetting is not a failure. It is simply what happens when a mind grows tired enough, quiet enough, still enough to stop insisting on its own separateness from the vast, slow unfolding of everything around it. The boundary between you and the universe has always been softer than it seems in the bright, busy hours of ordinary waking life. Here, in this dim and unhurried hour, the boundary softens further still, and that is not something to resist. That is something to allow. Consider, if you can hold the thought loosely, the way the atoms that make up your hands right now, resting somewhere beneath blankets or sheets, have existed for billions of years in one form or another. Not created for you specifically. Not summoned into being for this moment. Simply borrowed, briefly, from a universe that has been recycling matter since its very first stars ignited and, in their long slow deaths, exhaled the raw material of everything that came after. The hydrogen in your body is nearly as old as the universe itself, formed in the first minutes after the Big Bang, patient beyond imagining, waiting through unthinkable stretches of cosmic time before finding its way, eventually, into the particular configuration that is you, here, now, breathing slowly in the dark. And when this body eventually returns its borrowed matter to the world, as all things do, those atoms will not vanish. They will simply continue, the way light continues, the way galaxies continue, moving on to become something else entirely, some other fleeting shape the universe decides to wear for a while. There is no need to find this unsettling. If anything, let it function as a kind of quiet reassurance, The way certain thoughts can loosen something tight in the chest without your quite noticing when the tightness first began to ease. You are not a fragile, isolated accident perched briefly on the surface of a small planet, cut off from the rest of existence by some meaningful wall of separation. You are instead a temporary and particular arrangement of very old material that has already survived the deaths of stars, the collapse of ancient nebulae, the violent birth pangs of galaxies not unlike Alcyonius, though smaller, calmer, less inclined toward the dramatic radio outbursts that first drew human attention to that distant giant. Your existence, however brief it may feel from the inside, is continuous with a process that has been unfolding since the universe's first fraction of a second, and will likely continue long after the sun that warms your particular corner of space has swollen, reddened, and quietly ended its own long life. Astronomers estimate that stars like the Sun burn for roughly 10 billion years before exhausting the hydrogen at their core, and our own star is only partway through that long, slow arc, meaning that for a very long time yet, this small planet will continue to receive its quota of daylight, its quota of warmth, its quota of the particular golden light that makes photosynthesis possible, that makes forests possible, that makes the simple, ordinary miracle of a sunrise possible, morning after morning, largely unnoticed, endlessly repeated. Against that backdrop, a single night, this specific slow unwinding of hours toward sleep, might seem impossibly small. And it is small, in the way that a single grain of sand is small against the shoreline that contains it. But smallness was never a flaw in this picture. The shoreline requires each grain. The night requires each breath. The universe, whatever else it may be, does not seem inclined to waste even its smallest components, and there is no reason to believe it would start now, with you, in this particular quiet hour. Let your attention drift back toward Alcyonius one more time, not with the sharp focus of daytime curiosity, but with the loose, unfocused attention that belongs to the edge of sleep. Somewhere out there, its jets continue reaching outward into the dark, moving at speeds that would make any human vehicle seem motionless by comparison, and yet, from any reasonable human vantage point, appearing utterly still, frozen in a single eternal moment, because the changes happening within it unfold across timescales too vast for any single human lifetime to witness. What looks like stillness is not stillness. What looks like silence is not silence. It is simply motion too slow, too vast, too patient for a mind shaped by short days and short years to perceive directly. And perhaps that offers one final, gentle thought to carry with you now, as your own thoughts begin to slow into something looser, softer, less concerned with sharp edges and clear conclusions. Perhaps what feels, tonight, like stillness in your own body, like silence in your own mind, is not truly still at all, but simply moving at a pace too slow, too deep, too patient for your waking mind to notice, the way rest itself often arrives not as a sudden event but as a slow accumulation of small surrenders, one following another, gently, quietly, the way light continues to travel. Through the dark, without needing to announce its own arrival, without needing anyone to notice the exact moment it crosses from one stretch of space into the next. There is a particular kind of darkness that exists between galaxies, a darkness so complete, so absolute, that it becomes difficult for the waking mind to hold its true dimensions. The space separating Alcyonius from its nearest galactic neighbors stretches for millions of light-years, distances so vast that light itself, the fastest thing the universe permits, requires unthinkable stretches of time simply to cross the gap. And within that darkness, that great cold quiet between islands of stars, there is almost nothing at all. A few scattered atoms of hydrogen, drifting so far apart from one another that by any ordinary definition, the space qualifies as a more perfect vacuum than anything achievable in a laboratory on Earth. This is the medium through which the light from Alcyonius's jets has traveled, not through some dense and busy corridor, but through emptiness so profound that emptiness itself begins to feel like the wrong word, too small a word, too human a word, for something so vast and so complete. And yet, even within that emptiness, there is structure. The cosmic web mentioned earlier does not simply vanish into the space between galaxies. It threads through it, quietly, invisibly, a scaffold of gas and dark matter that stretches across the observable universe in patterns resembling something between a spider's web and the branching structure of a forest's root system, though even that comparison feels inadequate, borrowed from a scale too small and too familiar to truly capture what astronomers have mapped using the light from countless distant galaxies, their positions plotted carefully across decades of patient observation. Until the underlying architecture of the cosmos began, slowly, to reveal itself. Galaxies do not float randomly through space, scattered without pattern like dust thrown carelessly into the wind. They gather along these vast filaments, clustering in some regions, leaving other regions nearly empty, forming a structure so large that individual galaxies within it, even galaxies as staggering as Alcyonius, become something closer to single droplets of water within an ocean current, carried along paths shaped by gravity operating across scales that dwarf even galactic distances. Perhaps it helps to imagine this the way you might imagine looking down at a river from a great height, high enough that individual waves and eddies disappear entirely, high enough that only the broad, slow bending of the river's overall path remains visible, curving gently around obstacles too large to perceive individually from that altitude. The cosmic web operates on a similar principle, though scaled up almost beyond comprehension, its rivers made not of water but of matter itself, its currents shaped not by riverbanks but by the accumulated gravitational pull of everything the universe contains. Within that structure, galaxies drift, slowly, following invisible channels laid down in the earliest moments after the Big Bang, when tiny fluctuations in the density of the infant universe, fluctuations smaller than a single percent, smaller than the width of an eyelash relative to the whole, became the seeds from which all of this eventually grew. Every galaxy you might ever learn the name of, every cluster, every void, every vast reach of near-nothingness between them, traces its origin back to those first faint irregularities, ripples in a universe still cooling from its own explosive birth, ripples too small to notice at the time and yet consequential enough to determine, billions of years later, exactly where galaxies like Alcyonius would eventually form, exactly where its extraordinary jets would eventually stretch, exactly where the light now reaching human instruments would eventually begin its long and patient journey. There is something worth sitting with in the fact that something so small, a fluctuation representing barely a whisper of difference in the density of the early universe, could cascade forward across billions of years into something as unimaginably vast as the galaxy your mind has been resting within. In these quiet late hours, this galaxy stretched across 10 million light-years, larger than nearly any structure humanity has ever measured or named. Small beginnings, given enough time, given enough patience, given enough of the universe's peculiar willingness to let things simply continue without interference, without rushing, without demanding early resolution, can become almost anything. This is not a metaphor being imposed upon the universe from the outside. It is simply how the universe appears to operate, at every scale, from the growth of galaxies to the slow accumulation of sediment that eventually becomes stone, to the quiet, cumulative effect of a single slow breath following another, and another, until, without any single dramatic moment marking the transition, wakefulness has become something closer to rest, and rest has become something closer to sleep, the change too gradual to notice as it happens, visible only in retrospect, the way. Astronomers can only recognize the full shape of a galaxy's structure by stepping back, far enough, long enough, patient enough to let the whole pattern reveal itself slowly across time, rather than all at once, rather than in some single sudden flash of understanding that arrives fully formed and requires no patience at all. Think, for a moment, of the astronomers themselves, the quiet, careful hands behind the instruments that first caught the signal from Alcyonius. Somewhere on this planet, in a control room lit by the soft glow of monitors, in the small hours of some ordinary night not unlike this one, a researcher sat watching data accumulate on a screen, watching numbers resolve slowly into something meaningful, something unprecedented, a galaxy larger than any yet measured, its jet stretching so far that the scale itself seemed at first almost like an error, a mistake in the calculation, something to be checked and rechecked before it could be trusted. There is a particular kind of patience required for that work, a willingness to sit with uncertainty for long stretches of time, to resist the urge to announce a discovery before it has been verified, to let the data speak slowly rather than forcing it toward a premature conclusion. That patience mirrors, in its own way, the patience the universe itself seems to require of anyone who wishes to understand it. Nothing about the cosmos rewards haste. The light took millions of years to arrive. The verification took additional years of careful cross-referencing, additional observations from other instruments, other observatories, other careful hands confirming what the first data seemed to suggest, until finally, cautiously, the finding could be trusted enough to share. There is something quietly moving about this collaborative patience, this willingness of many different people, working often without knowing one another, separated by continents and institutions and years, to slowly assemble a single coherent picture of something too vast for any single mind to grasp alone. No one person discovered Alcyonius in the way a single explorer might plant a flag on some newly reached shore. It emerged instead from decades of accumulated radio astronomy, from instruments built upon the foundations of earlier instruments, from mathematical techniques refined across generations of careful, unglamorous work, from countless smaller discoveries that, layered together slowly over time, eventually made it possible to recognize what the data was actually showing. In this sense, the galaxy's discovery mirrors its own physical nature, something built slowly, incrementally, without any single dramatic moment of creation, structure accumulating quietly across long stretches of time until, eventually, unmistakably, it becomes something too large to overlook. Perhaps this offers a kind of permission, if permission is even the right word for something as involuntary as sleep. Permission to let your own rest arrive the same way, not through any single decisive act of falling, but through the same slow accumulation, small softenings compounding upon other small softenings, one relaxed muscle contributing to the relaxation of the next, one slower breath making the following breath easier still, until the cumulative weight of small changes becomes something large enough to carry you fully across the threshold you have been approaching this entire time. You do not need to identify the exact moment sleep begins. Astronomers cannot identify the exact moment a galaxy finishes forming, either. There is no single instant marking the transition from formation to completion, no clean boundary separating one state from another. There is only the long, slow process itself, and then, at some point, looking back, the recognition that the process has, in fact, arrived somewhere significant, somewhere different from where it began. The scale of Alcyonius, its 10 million light-years of extent, its almost incomprehensible reach across intergalactic space, exists not because of any single catastrophic event but because of sustained, patient accretion across enormous stretches of cosmic time, matter drawn slowly inward, energy released slowly outward, the whole vast structure built through nothing more dramatic than continuation, than persistence, than the simple willingness of physical processes to keep unfolding according to their nature without needing external encouragement or intervention. Your own body, in this quiet hour, is engaged in something structurally similar, though obviously smaller in scale, more modest in ambition. Systems slowing, muscles softening, the mind's usual sharp edges blurring gently into something rounder, quieter, less insistent on clarity, less interested in maintaining the alert, defended posture that daylight hours seem to require. This softening does not require your active participation. It does not require effort or insistence. It requires only your willingness to stop resisting it, the way a galaxy does not need to insist on its own gravity, does not need to work at holding its stars in orbit, but simply allows gravity to do what gravity has always done, patiently, continuously, without dramatic announcement, until slowly, gradually, a coherent structure emerges from what once seemed like scattered, disconnected pieces, drifting quietly now towards something that increasingly resembles Sleep itself, not as an event arriving from somewhere outside you, but as something that has been quietly assembling itself this entire time, gathering slowly the way a galaxy gathers, the way a shoreline gathers its grains of sand one small deposit at a time, until what once seemed distant and uncertain becomes, simply, where you already are. Consider, one final time, the light that carried you here. It left its source before you existed, before the instruments that caught it existed, before the observatories, before the astronomers, before the long chain of careful, curious minds that made its detection possible. It traveled through darkness so complete that darkness stopped being the right word for it, through emptiness structured invisibly by filaments older than any star you can see tonight, and it arrived, eventually, quietly, without needing anyone to notice the precise moment of its arrival. That arrival did not depend on urgency. It depended only on continuation, only on the light's willingness to keep moving, unhurried, indifferent to the passage of ordinary time, until distance itself resolved into presence. Your own rest has been traveling toward you in much the same way. Not summoned, not forced, simply arriving, the way all patient things arrive, through the accumulation of small, unremarkable moments rather than through any single decisive act. Each slow breath has been a kind of photon, moving forward through the dark of this hour, contributing quietly to something larger than itself, something you were never required to assemble by force. The tension in your shoulders has been dissolving the way ancient structures dissolve, not collapsing suddenly but settling, gradually, into a lower and more stable configuration, the way matter settles along the cosmic web, the way galaxies settle into their long, slow orbits around each other, content to let gravity do the work that insistence never could. There is no need to hold on to Alcyonius any longer than feels natural. Let the galaxy recede now, the way all things at the edge of sleep recede, not vanishing abruptly but drifting gently out of focus, the way a distant light dims not because it goes out but because the eyes watching it have finally stopped straining to keep it sharp. Its jets will continue reaching across 10 million light-years whether or not your attention remains fixed upon them. Its black hole will continue its slow, patient accumulation of mass across timescales indifferent to your wakefulness. The galaxy does not require your consciousness to persist, and in that quiet indifference there is a kind of relief, the same relief that comes from realizing you do not need to hold the universe together with your attention in order for it to continue existing safely without you, tonight, and every night after this one. What remains now is only the smaller, nearer universe of this room, this bed, this body finally permitted to rest as completely as it has wanted to for hours. The distances that mattered a moment ago, the millions of light years, the billions of years of cosmic history, can fold down now into something more modest, more immediate. The distance between one breath and the next, the distance between waking and sleep, a threshold far smaller than any galactic scale, and yet, in this moment, the only distance that matters at all. You have already been crossing it, slowly, the way light crosses the dark, the way patience crosses uncertainty, one unhurried increment at a time. There is nothing left to understand tonight. No further data to gather, no additional confirmation required, no remaining calculations left unresolved. The astronomers have already done their careful work, and their findings will still be there tomorrow, unchanged, patient, waiting the way discoveries wait, without needing to be revisited before you feel ready. Alcyonius will still be vast tomorrow. The cosmic web will still stretch, invisible and immense, beneath everything you can see. The black hole at the center of that galaxy will still be feeding, slowly, indifferently, on matter drawn inward across spans of time too long for any single mind to hold. None of it requires your vigilance. None of it requires you to stay awake in order to remain true. So let this be enough. Let the breath continue on its own, the way it has been continuing this entire time, without your instruction, without your effort, simply because breathing, like starlight, like gravity, like the slow formation of galaxies across billions of patient years, does not need to be forced in order to carry on. Let the body rest inside that same quiet law. Nothing rushed, nothing withheld, only continuation, only the soft, unbroken persistence of one moment following gently into the next, until awareness itself grows soft at the edges, dims like a distant galaxy sinking below the horizon of attention, and sleep, having traveled patiently this whole time to reach you, finally, quietly, without any fanfare at all, arrives.